Before we dive in, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy gripping HFY sci-fi stories where humans defy expectations, challenge galactic norms, and bring heart into places no alien dares to tread. Your support helps these stories reach more readers. Now let's begin. A siren wailed through Outpost Sigma 29, sharp enough to rattle the window panes of the cramped veterinary wing wedged between a cargo depot and a hollow arcade. Dr. Elias Ward paused mid-stitch on a sedated, six-legged cargo lizard, confused. The emergency tone wasn't the normal fire alert or atmospheric rupture warning. This one he'd only heard once, during a station-wide drill he'd assumed was overdramatic. Apex class threat detected. Seek shelter. Barricade all doors. Repeat, Apex class threat detected. Elias exhaled slowly and trimmed the final suture before covering the lizard with an auto-healer mesh. The world beyond his clinic window dissolved into chaos. Merchants grabbed their goods. Dock workers sprinted. A pair of chittering insectoid twins tripped over each other in panic. Even the hollow arcade's neon sign dimmed as its security shutters clanged shut. He wiped his hands on a towel and stepped outside just far enough to see the source of the hysteria. The creature approaching the medical district moved like a collapsing star disguised in flesh, heavy, deliberate, wounded. Tall as a bulkhead door, armored in obsidian black plating cracked and scorched from plasma fire, it stumbled forward with a low, guttural vibration that rippled through the ground. Its eyes, molten gold slits, flickered unfocused. A Corvikian. Apex class. The kind of being military strategists used entire PowerPoint sessions to explain how to avoid. From the neighboring clinic, Dr. Sechtal burst out wearing a bio-sealed vest and 3 layers of panic. His frill stood straight up as he saw Elias standing in the open. Human. Back inside. It's coming this way. His voice cracked 2 octaves too high. It's a Corvikian war breed. Apex class. They survive antimatter charges. Not today they don't, Elias muttered, watching the giant stumble forward with a limp that spoke more of exhaustion than intent. Station drones swooped down from their docking rails, weapons primed, issuing sterile warnings demanding the creature halt. The Corvikian didn't even react. Its breathing came ragged, almost wheezing, as if every inhale shredded something inside. Then, as if gravity doubled, it fell to one knee. The plaza scattered even further. Someone shouted for barricades. Another screamed to fire preemptively. The drones targeting lasers tracked across the creature's chest. Elias stepped forward. Human. Sechtal grabbed his arm with trembling claws. You step closer and your species will learn what vaporized bone smells like. He's hurt, Elias said, shaking him off. Look at the gate. Look at the way he's holding that side panel. There's internal bleeding. Maybe more. Humans and their ridiculous empathy. The Corvikian's massive head lifted at the sound of voices. One eye fixed on Elias with the faintest spark of recognition, or simply animal instinct. The glow in it wasn't predatory. It was disoriented. Desperate. Elias raised his hands slowly, palms forward. Easy, he murmured, voice low and steady. You're going to collapse if you keep pushing yourself. The giant's breath hitched. Not in aggression. Elias had worked around enough wounded animals to know the sound of a creature trying very hard not to show fear. He took another measured step. Elias Ward, step away immediately, shouted a ranger officer taking cover behind a supply cart. We have clearance to neutralize. No you don't. Elias didn't look back. Because if it wanted to tear through this station, it would have done it before limping into a medical block. The Corvikian's other knee buckled, forcing it fully to the ground. Its forearm, thick as a steel column, braced against the floor but only barely. Elias approached until he could smell scorched plating and the metallic tang of exposed tissue. Up close, the creature's tremor wasn't hostility, it was the trembling of something suppressing instinct, perhaps expecting pain, perhaps expecting execution. He recognized it instantly. The lizard on his table earlier had done the same thing under anesthesia failure. You're scared, Elias said quietly, mostly to himself. Stars above. You're terrified. The Corvikian's head dipped as if responding, not with comprehension but relief at someone not screaming. Sechtal had edged close enough to hiss at Elias. It's manipulating you. They can mimic suffering to bait prey. Elias glanced back at him. He's losing blood at a rate no creature fakes. The drones beeped warning tones, charging weapons. The Corvikian swayed. Its voice, impossibly deep yet unsteady, escaped in a single fractured whisper. Don't come close. Elias exhaled. If you truly didn't want me close, I'd be paced by now. He reached his hand toward the creature's damaged flank, stopping just short to gauge its reaction. Instead of lunging, the massive form froze, conflict carving itself into stiffened muscles, as if the very act of allowing touch was an instinct it had never learned. The moment stretched tight. Then the Corvikian shuddered and collapsed completely, armor scraping against the pavement. The drones locked in. Elias stepped between them and the fallen titan. "Back off," he said, voice firm. "You cannot." "He's a patient," Elias snapped. "If you fire, you're firing through me." The plaza fell into stunned silence. The creature's golden eyes flickered once more at the sound of Elias's voice, an anchor in a storm of alarms and threats. Elias crouched beside the towering form, checking vitals with quick, practiced motions. Pulse erratic. Temperature dangerously high. Breathing shallow but fighting. He didn't know why a being like this would come here, of all places. Not yet. But he knew what he had in front of him. A living, terrified creature in need of help. Seshtal looked between Elias and the unconscious giant, aghast. "You are out of your mind." "Probably," Elias said, already pulling out a portable stabilizer. "But someone has to keep this thing alive long enough to ask why it came." For a brief instant, before unconsciousness claimed it entirely, the Corvikian's gaze settled on Elias again, softened, searching, almost relieved. Elias met its fading stare with a calm, steady one of his own. "You're safe," he said. The words weren't true yet. The drones hovered. Officers aimed rifles. Civilians peeked out from barricades in fear. But as the Titan's eyes closed, breathing rough but present, Elias felt something shift. Not safety. Not yet. But a beginning. And beginnings always asked for courage, from humans most of all. Elias worked with brisk determination, the kind that formed when hesitation meant death. The Corvikian's body had been moved into his clinic with the help of 2 industrial lifters that strained under the creature's sheer mass. As the door sealed behind them, the outside chaos faded to a muffled roar, leaving only the rhythmic rasp of the alien's labored breathing. He activated his diagnostic array, letting its soft glow sweep across the creature's armor plates. Beneath the scorched exterior, the scan revealed fractures, deep lacerations, and internal bleeding severe enough that any lesser species would have died long before reaching help. He knelt beside the unmoving Titan, feeling heat radiating off it in oppressive waves. "You weren't just in a fight," he murmured. "You were running from something." The Corvikian stirred at the sound of his voice. Its eyelids twitched. The golden slits beneath fluttered open, unfocused but aware enough to register the human leaning over it. A low growl reverberated from deep in its chest, not a threat, but an instinctive sound born from pain and exhaustion. Elias placed one steady hand against the unbroken section of its plating. "I need you to stay still. If you thrash, you'll tear something important." The creature's massive fingers twitched. Its voice, when it finally emerged, came out rough, as if passing through a throat littered with broken stone. "Human, leave, dangerous." "You keep saying that," Elias replied, adjusting the stabilization field around the creature's torso. "And yet you haven't made a single attempt to remove me. I'm going to take that as permission." A faint huff escaped the creature, too soft to be amusement, too weary to be warning. Elias couldn't tell which, but he chose to believe it leaned toward trust. The scan highlighted a structural tear beneath the left arm, dangerously close to a nerve cluster. Elias retrieved a bone laser and medfoam, working with delicate precision. As he cleaned the exposed tissue, the Corvikian emitted a deep, involuntary rumble that shook the instrument tray. "I know it hurts," Elias said, voice low. "But I need you awake for a bit." The creature's eye opened again, more focused now, as if studying the human who dared treat an apex predator. It blinked slowly, a motion that somehow conveyed both confusion and caution. "What do you seek?" the creature rasped. "Answers," Elias said. "Mostly. But right now, I'm seeking to make sure you don't die on my floor." The creature's head lowered in something like resignation. Elias noted the motion, a silent acceptance of vulnerability, and adjusted the medfoam applicator. From the corner of the room, Seshtal watched with a mixture of horror and fascination, his frill pressed flat against his skull. "Humans are mad," he whispered. "Truly dangerously mad." "I'll bill you for commentary later," Elias said without looking up. "Right now I need another stabilizer patch." Seshtal hesitated but retrieved the patch, keeping as much distance as possible. He slid it across a table rather than hand it over directly. Elias reached for it but paused when the Corvikian's arm tensed. "It's all right," Elias said gently. "He's helping. Sort of." The alien watched the smaller being with narrow eyes full of suspicion. Only when Seshtal retreated did its posture loosen again, if only by fractions. "You're unusually alert for someone losing this much blood," Elias said as he placed the stabilizer over the primary wound. "Is that natural for your species?" The creature blinked again, slower this time. "We were engineered not to fall." "Engineered?" Elias echoed. "So you didn't choose to be what they label you?" A harsh, ragged breath served as the only answer. Elias filed that away for later. Right now the creature's pulse, heavy, rhythmic and struggling, demanded more attention. He prepared a cellular booster, but the Corvikian shifted suddenly, grabbing Elias's wrist with surprising speed. The pressure was enormous, but the grip wasn't tight enough to break bone. It was a warning, not an attack. "No, booster," the creature growled. "Interacts poorly with my kind." Elias frowned. "Then tell me what won't kill you." The Corvikian hesitated, confusion flickering through its gaze, as if shocked the question had been asked at all. "Saline. Heat reduction. And time." "I can work with time," Elias said. "Not so much with heat. You're cooking yourself from the inside." The creature closed its eyes as though the truth weighed heavier than its own body. "Fear triggers internal surge. Hard to control." Fear. That word didn't fit the stories told about Corvikians, about the unstoppable monsters bred for war. But the tremor in the creature's breathing, the rigid stillness of its posture, and the flickers of panic beneath its armor told Elias more than any rumor. "You're afraid," Elias said. "And that's why your body's overheating." The creature flinched as if struck. Its voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. "I am not supposed to feel fear." "Well," Elias said, adjusting a cooling unit and sliding it beneath the exposed plates, "lucky for you, I happen to be very good at treating animals who pretend they don't feel anything." Silence stretched between them. The creature's breathing steadied slightly as the cooling unit hummed. Elias worked quietly, ensuring each movement was deliberate and non-threatening. Outside, distant alarms faded as the station regained control. Inside the clinic, the tension shifted from raw survival to fragile calm. The Corvikian opened its eyes once more. "Why do you help me?" "Because you walk to a clinic," Elias said. "Creatures seeking help don't come to kill." Another faint, conflicted rumble echoed through the room. Seshtal's frill fluttered nervously, but Elias didn't look away from the creature. "You should know," the Corvikian said, voice trembling despite its massive frame, "those who injured me will follow." Elias tightened one last stabilizing band around its torso and met its gaze without flinching. "Then we'll be ready." The creature studied him, something fragile and unfamiliar forming behind its molten eyes. "You are different," it murmured. "Maybe," Elias replied. "Or maybe you just needed someone to treat you like more than a weapon." The Corvikian's eyes closed again, but this time the motion lacked fear. It sounded almost like rest. Elias checked the monitors one more time, ensuring the giant's vitals stabilized just enough to hold. The room settled into quiet, but beneath that calm, an unspoken truth coiled. Whatever hunted this being wasn't finished. And Elias, despite every warning and every shard of common sense, had just declared himself part of the conflict. He only hoped he understood what that meant. Ral woke to the dull hum of medical equipment and the faint scent of antiseptic, a strangely gentle contrast to the metallic tang of battle still lingering in his mind. His vision adjusted slowly, revealing the cramped interior of the human's clinic, too small for his frame, yet meticulously reorganized to accommodate him. Tables had been moved, cabinets shoved aside, and the floor reinforced with support braces. Ral had seen war medics improvise under duress, but never with such quiet finesse. Elias sat nearby, charting data streams on a cracked datapad. His posture was relaxed but vigilant, as if ready to intervene the moment Ral's vitals shifted. When he noticed the alien's eyes open, he set the device aside. "You're awake," Elias said. "Good. I wasn't entirely sure you'd make it through the night without another temperature spike." Ral tested his limbs carefully, feeling the ache of repaired tissue and the weight of exhaustion still anchoring him. He expected restraints. Most civilizations bound his kind by instinct alone, but found none. Only stabilizers and cooling units, each placed with respect for anatomy most humans should not know. "You worked long," Ral rumbled. "I wasn't going to let you die after dragging yourself halfway across the district," Elias replied. "Besides, you made my clinic more interesting than usual. I normally treat cargo pets and merchant mascots." The attempt at humor was thin, but it nudged something inside Ral, a flicker of bewildered amusement. His species did not laugh, but he understood the intent. Elias approached with cautious confidence, checking the cooling unit embedded beneath Ral's plating. Your fever dropped a little. You're responding better to low-intensity therapy than I expected. Ral watched him work, baffled by the human's complete absence of fear. Even now, within easy reach of claws that could cleave armor, Elias behaved as though tending a wounded hound. Why? Ral finally asked. Why risk your life for me? Elias paused, finger hovering above the temperature gauge. Because you needed help. And because fear isn't a diagnosis. Ral's throat tightened. The words were simple, yet they cracked open memories he'd tried to bury. Children of his species locked in stasis crates, mercenaries branding them with guild symbols, commanders treating them as living artillery instead of beings with will or pain. He shifted, wincing at a bolt of discomfort. Elias stepped back automatically to give him space, not out of fear but consideration. You said you ran from something, Elias said. I'm guessing that wasn't an exaggeration. Ral's jaw clenched. Silence stretched long enough that Elias began to move away, perhaps thinking the conversation had reached its natural end. But Ral wasn't ready to let it drift into nothingness. He needed someone to understand, even if that someone was a fragile human. The Mercenary Guild, Ral said at last. They captured younglings of my kind. Trained them. Broke them. I sought to stop them. They marked me for elimination. Elias turned back, expression darkening with a mixture of anger and empathy. So you're being hunted for protecting your own? For resisting a fate I once shared, Ral corrected. I was one of the first engineered into what they call an Apex-class soldier. I broke rank the moment I understood what they planned. The clinic felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. Elias leaned against the wall, processing the revelation with a quiet seriousness most humans rarely displayed. They'll come looking for you, Elias said. You mentioned that already. They will come for anyone aiding me, Ral warned. You hold more courage than sense. Elias allowed a faint smile. Story of my career. Ral studied him, sensing a stubbornness that bordered on reckless. Yet beneath it lay something far rarer among the species he'd encountered, conviction without arrogance. Elias was not trying to tame him, control him, or claim some moral superiority. He was simply choosing to care. A sharp beep interrupted the quiet. Elias checked the monitor, frowning as a small icon blinked on the corner of the screen. That wasn't active last night. Ral recognized the pulse immediately. The signal was faint but unmistakable. A tracking beacon. Buried deep. They found me, Ral said, voice low and bitter. I destroyed all visible tech. I did not realize they implanted another. Elias cursed under his breath. Can I remove it? Ral shook his head. It buries itself near the spine. Removal requires specialized tools. Or someone with no regard for survival. Elias grabbed a scanning probe anyway, moving behind the massive creature with unnerving calm. Well, I'm not planning to die today, but I can at least map it. Ral stiffened instinctively as the probe swept across his back, but Elias worked with steady, methodical care. When he finished, he set the device aside. They'll be here sooner than I'd like, Elias said. You're in no shape to run. I do not flee, Ral replied. Good, Elias said. Because neither do I. For a moment, Ral wasn't sure he'd heard correctly. Most beings who encountered him either tried to use him or hide from him. But this human spoke as though standing beside him in battle was as natural as breathing. You do not comprehend the scale of what approaches, Ral said quietly. They will send squads, drones, armored units. For them, I am an asset gone rogue. Elias folded his arms, expression firm. And for me, you're a patient who deserves a fighting chance. I'm not abandoning you. Ral's breath caught at that, not from pain but from a sensation he could barely name. Gratitude felt foreign, almost sharp. Before he could respond, a tremor passed through the floor. Elias glanced toward the window. Shockwave. Something big just dropped out of orbit. Ral felt it too, the distinct, heavy signature of a mercenary strike vessel. They were early. Too early. Elias moved quickly, securing equipment and checking the clinic's emergency barriers. We'll need time. You can't fight yet, but you can survive if we're smart. Ral shifted, planting a clawed hand against the ground to steady himself. You stand beside me. Of course I do, Elias said. You asked for help. That's all I needed. The tremors grew stronger. Distant alarms rose. And in that moment, despite the pain, the fear, and the approach of enemies, Ral felt something rare. Certainty. This human would not run. And neither would he. The next shockwave rattled the clinic lights, sending a ripple through every loose instrument. Elias steadied himself against the counter while Raoul pushed upright, muscles trembling under the strain. The apex predator's posture was uneven, wounded, but his eyes burned with a steady, controlled resolve that no injury could suppress. "They've deployed atmospheric suppressors," Raoul said, reading the vibrations through the floor. "They intend to isolate this district." Elias secured the last barrier plate over the window. "Then we make sure they find more resistance than they expected." Outside, metallic clamor echoed up the street, mercenary boots striking pavement in perfect cadence. Their equipment hummed with cold precision, their movements predatory and purposeful. Elias checked the feed from the external camera. At least 2 squads fanned out, accompanied by drones that scanned doorways with surgical detachment. They didn't storm. They advanced with practiced confidence, believing their prey cornered. Raoul braced himself against the reinforced wall. "You should not be here when they breach." "I'm exactly where I should be," Elias said. "I'm not letting them drag you off for dissection or reconditioning." The words landed heavier than Elias intended. Raoul turned his head slightly, regarding the human with an expression caught between wariness and something almost reverent. "You fight for a species not your own," Raoul murmured. "That is rare among the stars." Elias picked up a tranquilizer drone, modified, overcharged, and questionably legal. "You're my patient. And right now that's reason enough." A sudden, piercing screech tore through the clinic as one of the mercenary drones cut through the outer barrier. Sparks cascaded across the floor. The reinforced door buckled under pressure, metal groaning with each mechanical strike. Raoul flexed his claws. "They breach. I will hold them off." "You can barely stand," Elias countered. "We'll work together." The door finally tore open, ripped from its hinges as 2 armored mercenaries surged inside. Their rifles glowed with containment mode energy, designed to immobilize but not kill. Raoul recognized the model instantly, tools for capturing apex warbreeds alive. They fired without hesitation. Elias moved before he could think, shoving a cabinet between Raoul and the first blast. The energy tore through half the structure, but its diffusion bought a precious second. Raoul lunged forward, catching the mercenary by the chest and hurling him into the opposite wall. The impact dented metal. The second mercenary pivoted, rifle aimed directly at Elias. Raoul crossed the room in a blur of motion that seemed impossible for someone so injured. His arms smashed into the weapon, sending it skidding across the floor. The mercenary stumbled back, but Raoul caught him by the harness and slammed him down, rendering him unconscious. The clinic shook again as a heavier unit approached. Elias saw it through the torn doorway, an armored enforcer, towering and plated, carrying a suppression cannon capable of dropping even a healthy Corvikian. "Down?" Elias shouted. The cannon fired, releasing a flood of shimmering energy. Raoul shielded Elias with his body, taking the full force of the blast across his weakened armor. The shock drove him to one knee, plates buckling under the strain. His breath stuttered. Elias crouched beside him, checking rapidly for damage. "Talk to me. Are you still with me?" Raoul forced a steady inhale. "Pain is manageable." "You don't look manageable," Elias muttered, but his hands were already moving, applying pressure to stabilize a ruptured seal. The enforcer stepped forward, cannon charging again. Elias activated one of his modified drones and sent it darting through the air. The tiny device latched onto the armor before detonating in a concentrated burst. The explosion staggered the enforcer, knocking its aim wide. Raoul surged up with a guttural roar, using the last reserves of his strength. He struck the enforcer in a sweeping arc that shattered its stabilizers. The mercenary toppled backward, crashing through the clinic's front railing and into the street. For a moment, the world stilled. Elias breathed hard, adrenaline pulsing through his veins. Raoul leaned heavily against the wall, sides heaving. "They will send more," Raoul said, voice ragged. "They always send more." Elias checked the camera again. Dropships circled overhead, preparing to deploy reinforcements. Civilians fled the district in scattered waves. The outpost's meager security forces were nowhere near capable of handling what approached. "We can't stay here," Elias said. "They'll level the entire clinic to get to you." Raoul closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the truth. When he opened them again, they burned with renewed clarity. "I am the reason they come. If I leave, you survive. And if you leave, they win," Elias said. "They keep hunting your people. They keep turning you into weapons. You cannot fight this war for me." "I'm not fighting a war," Elias replied. "I'm protecting someone who asked for help." The word struck deeper than Elias would ever realize. Raoul lowered his head in acknowledgement, a gesture that carried far more weight in his culture than any spoken vow. Another explosion rocked the district. Elias grabbed his medpack and slung it over his shoulder. We need to move. If we reach the maintenance shafts, we can lose them long enough to regroup. Raoul struggled to stand but faltered. Elias moved to support him, and for once the apex predator did not resist the touch. You should not risk so much, Raoul said quietly. And you should stop underestimating humans, Elias replied. Raoul let out a breath that was almost a laugh, though lined with pain. Very well. Lead the way. Elias stepped toward the rear exit, then froze at the sudden shadow passing across the window. A heavy silhouette descended outside, too large to be a simple soldier or drone. A strike commander. Raoul recognized the shape instantly. His entire frame tensed with instinctive dread. He is here. Who? Elias asked. The one who branded my kind. The one who controls them. Elias's grip tightened around the medpack strap. Then this is where we make our stand. Raoul's gaze locked with his, and for the first time, there was no fear, only resolve. Together, Raoul said. Together, Elias echoed. Outside, the strike commander landed with the force of falling stone. And the final confrontation began to take shape. The air hung thick with smoke and the acrid tang of scorched metal as the final echoes of the battle faded. Elias and Raoul emerged from the wreckage of the clinic, both breathing heavily, sweat and soot streaking their faces. The mercenary strike commander lay incapacitated a few meters away, his armor fractured and sparks flickering from severed circuits. The remaining mercenaries had retreated into the chaos of the district, shaken by the sight of the apex predator and his human counterpart standing together, unbowed. Raoul lowered his massive frame to the ground, exhaustion and injury weighing him down, but his eyes stayed fixed on Elias. You, he rumbled, voice roughened by the strain of survival, you are extraordinary among your kind. Elias gave a tired, wry smile, wiping a streak of blood from his forehead. I could say the same about you. Most apex-class predators I meet don't stick around long enough to be called extraordinary. The Corvikian let out a low, almost melodic rumble that seemed like approval, or perhaps acknowledgement of the rare bond forming between them. For the first time in his life he felt the absence of constant threat. The hunt was over for now, and someone had actually seen him as more than a weapon. The Galactic Council's emissaries arrived shortly after, drawn by the battle's residual signal and emergency alerts. Their hovercrafts glided over the plaza as uniformed officials stepped forward, faces a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. They had expected a violent scene, an apex-class predator wreaking havoc, human victims in terror, and perhaps collateral destruction enough to condemn the creature outright. Instead, they found Elias tending to Raoul's injured form while the apex predator had actively restrained his own aggression, showing careful control rather than mindless violence. A counselor, a tall being with translucent skin revealing pulsing veins beneath, stepped forward. Explain this. This creature was deemed a galactic threat. You human appear unharmed. And yet the predator is, he gestured at Raoul, still alive and conscious. Elias met the counselor's gaze with steady calm. He's not a threat. He's a patient. He was injured fleeing from those who would use him as a weapon. He did not attack unless provoked. He has defended himself only when his survival, and mine, was at stake. Whispers spread through the assembled council. Such reasoning defied conventional assessments of apex-class predators. Most species submitted reports claiming these beings were irredeemably violent, their intelligence secondary to their lethality. Here before their eyes the opposite was evident. The predator had exercised judgment, restraint, and even loyalty. One emissary stepped forward, scanning the wounded beast with a portable diagnostic orb. The readouts confirmed Elias's assessment. Internal systems were stabilizing, injury serious but survivable, behavior controlled and rational. The apex predator had acted with deliberate calculation. Raoul shifted slightly, testing the council's response, and Elias placed a reassuring hand on his forearm. The giant seemed to relax under the touch, as if trusting the human to interpret the scrutiny of these alien bureaucrats correctly. Your testimony, the counselor asked, voice measured, is unusual. How do you claim such authority over a being classified above planetary lethal capacity? Elias shrugged, exhaustion showing in his posture. I don't claim authority. I claimed responsibility. Someone had to see him as more than a weapon. The counselor studied him, then Raoul, for long seconds that felt like lifetimes. Finally, a nod. Then by order of provisional jurisdiction and pending further review, the apex predator shall remain under supervised containment, not incarceration. The human shall act as caretaker and liaison. Any violation of this arrangement will be met with council intervention. Raoul's eyes flickered at Elias, molten gold pupils softening. You place yourself in danger for my protection, he murmured, a low rumble of respect vibrating through his chest. This is unprecedented. Someone had to, Elias said. No one else was going to treat you like a being instead of a weapon. The council departed, leaving the district eerily quiet. Smoke spiraled from the wreckage, but the chaos had ended. Civilians cautiously emerged, eyes wide as they saw the human and apex predator standing side by side. Shock gave way to admiration as they realized the magnitude of what had occurred. An apex-class predator had fought and survived without indiscriminate killing. A human had stood undeterred beside him. Raoul lowered his massive head to eye level with Elias. You risked your life for me, he said softly. For a creature your kind has feared for centuries. And you didn't tear me apart while I treated you, Elias countered, allowing a faint smile. I call that fair trade. The apex predator emitted a low, throaty rumble that carried an almost lyrical cadence, resonating deep within the bones of anyone who heard it. It was the closest Raoul had come to laughter. Elias reached out, placing a hand on the thick, scarred plating of the creature's forearm. Will you stay? Elias asked. Not just for now but long-term? Raoul considered the question, his eyes scanning the horizon as if weighing the absence of imminent threat against the potential for future danger. I will stay. You saw me. You treated me as more than a monster. Elias's grin widened. Well, that and someone has to help me keep the local kids' pets from terrorizing the station. You're not exactly inconspicuous, so you might as well help. Raoul's rumble shifted into a sound of reluctant amusement. Together they surveyed the plaza, now quiet but scorched, a testament to their ordeal. The district would recover, and the story of a human who defied fear and an apex predator who resisted instinctive violence would spread. Their bond, forged in fire and reinforced through trust, was the beginning of something far larger than themselves. Elias glanced at Raoul, voice softening. You know, most people wouldn't have believed me if I said I'd end up running a clinic for apex predators. Raoul inclined his head, the glow of his eyes warmer, almost reflective. And yet here we are. I am not alone. Elias laughed lightly. Neither are you. Not anymore. As they turned toward the makeshift clinic, ready to rebuild what had been destroyed and prepare for whatever the galaxy might throw at them next, the tension of the day gave way to something rare, quiet triumph. Not just of survival but of understanding, empathy and courage. For the first time, the galaxy's deadliest predator had a companion who saw him as a living being, and the human had found a partner who defied every story he'd ever been told about apex predators. The station lights flickered on, illuminating the path ahead. Smoke spiraled skyward, carrying the promise of a new era. One where fear no longer dictated action and where courage and compassion could reshape even the most dangerous corners of the universe. Elias reached out, patting Raoul's armored forearm. You ready? He asked. Raoul rumbled, the sound deep and resonant. Yes. Together. And with that they stepped forward, side by side, leaving behind the wreckage of fear, forging a future neither had dared imagine alone.